Hi, my name's Lynn Bob, and I live in Seattle with my husband Dave. My darling 9-year-old granddaughter just lives 9 blocks away, and I get to see her often. She's like the joy of my life. But another joy is being a disciple of Jesus Christ, and that's part of why it was so fun to write this lesson. So who I am, I'm a writer. I've written a bunch of books. I'm a Presbyterian minister. I served 2 congregations in associate pastor roles, and I'm an adjunct professor. And I got to teach in New Zealand for 10 years. So that was one of the huge joys of my life, was being there. So I'm delighted to be with you in this series. In this third segment, we look at what it means to be a witness. And I don't know how many of you have ever gotten to serve on jury duty, but I had the privilege of being called to jury duty twice and serving on a jury both times. And boy, you are lectured by the judge to pay attention to what those witnesses saw and heard and experienced. And the judge is very clear with the witnesses: don't share opinions, but share what you have seen and heard, not what you think happened. And that's what it means to be a witness, is to share what we have seen and heard. Now, you may wonder why we're talking about being witnesses in the midst of the Great Commission, which doesn't mention the word witness. But in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, Jesus says to the disciples right before he ascends into heaven, he says, "You will be my witnesses in Judea, Samaria, and all the parts of the world." So in other words, close in, and then a little bit further out, and then a little bit further out, and then a little bit further out. You'll be my witnesses in all these places. And again, we talked about go. So some people will go and be a witness on the other side of the world because God calls them to. But for most of us, we'll be a witness as we go about our daily life. And our daily life might take us far away, and it might take us across the street, and it might take us right to the dining room table where we have a conversation with our family. But this be a witness has to do with testifying, really kind of like in a court, to what we have seen and heard about Jesus. So one of the most important things that we can do is pay attention to what God is doing in our own lives and talk about that with other people. How has Jesus answered prayer? How has the Holy Spirit guided us? How have we, I hope that sometimes you've experienced just a crazy thing happening that you didn't expect, that later you look back and you go, oh, that was God making that happen. Isn't that cool? And that's what it means to be a witness, is to share some of that stuff. It was really freeing for me when I realized that all Christians are called to be witnesses, but not all Christians are called to be evangelists. I realized this in part because I had a friend who clearly had evangelistic gifts, and she was hired by her church to sit in coffee shops 10 hours a week and talk to people. She's the kind of person who talks to strangers. She's the kind of person who chats with anybody who's around her. And surprise, surprise, those conversations always come around to talking about Jesus. I don't know how she does it. I'm not a gifted evangelist like that, but she talks to people everywhere she is. And that period of time when her church hired her to sit in coffee shops was early in her life. Later in her life, she was a physical trainer and helped people prepare to do marathons. And in that venue, she was always talking to people about Jesus, and people were becoming Christians around her. I'm not called to be that evangelist, but I, like all Christians, am called to be a witness to what I have experienced of God in maybe small or maybe large ways in my life. So as you work through this lesson with others or on your own, the opportunity is to think about where are the places that we're already comfortable being witnesses, and where are the places that it would be really helpful to grow in being a witness, grow in confidence. Someone told me that in their church, they do this thing called 3-story evangelism, where and you can cut out the word evangelism and use the word make disciples, 3-story disciple making. But they encourage the people in their congregation to listen to the other person's story and to be able to tell the gospel story, what are the basics of who Jesus is, and then to be able to tell their own story. This is how God has worked in my life. And that's part of what it means to be a witness, to be able to listen, to be able to know the basics of the gospel story from the Bible, and to be able to say, this is how I perceive God in me, God in my friends, my family, the people I know, God in my church. Look at what God has done. That's what it means to be a witness. And I really hope that talking about this topic is fruitful for you.